talk about personal transformation and also about happiness, about how we can notice things in our everyday life which can actually increase our well-being just by the nature of noticing them. And I've also, with my friend here, Alma Barajas, we started running meditation retreats last week, and I'll tell you more about that later. I'd like to talk to you today. My speech is entitled Return to Innocence. So sometimes we have a lot of focus, perhaps in this freedom community, talking about the bad things in the world, and maybe focusing on the people who are doing these things, the powers that shouldn't be, as some people say. But a lot of the time, the solutions can come from ourselves. As Max was talking about our own ethics, the politics are very divorced from our own experience of life, but our own ethics or our own behaviors, how we comport ourselves in our everyday life, can make a huge difference in how we feel and how we experience life. So I'd like to invite you all to sit up or push your shoulders back and take a deep breath. Perhaps as you inhale, you can push your shoulders up, and as you exhale, push your shoulders back and allow them to drop. Now, I'd like you to think about a time when you felt love or when you felt loved. Perhaps there's a moment where you were with a lover and that person took you by the hands and you felt their soft fingerprints against your palm, and you knew that you were accepted in that moment. Or perhaps when you saw an old friend after many years, and when you saw the look in their eyes, you knew that there was nothing to worry about. You knew that they saw you without judgment, simply relaxed and see you as you are. And I invite you to deepen that feeling within you. Perhaps you feel it within your heart, and perhaps it begins to extend, moving through your body, through the crown, through the neck, through your chest, your belly, your legs, your feet. It's interesting to think about when you think about the feet. It's kind of funny. If we think about all the sages, the saints, the gurus from history, their feet are actually quite similar to our feet. And if you notice your feet, perhaps as you're walking around Rancho Madre Tierra today and tomorrow, you can notice your own feet and start to imagine your feet as a saint's feet, or as Christ's feet, as Buddha's feet, or Krishna's feet. And think about how your feet are so similar to those. Perhaps the greatest people in history, perhaps they're not so different from us. Perhaps we all have the potential to grow into something like that. It's wonderful to use our imaginations. And as children, so many of us played make-believe, journeying through fantastical worlds, other planets, or wondering what our life might be like in the future. There is a magical phrase in the game of make-believe, which is, let's say. Let's say is this phrase we can use when we introduce a concept, when we begin to change the nature of our imaginary world. We change the rules or change our surroundings. This phrase, let's say, is also a phrase that I commonly use with my coaching clients when I want to help to expand their cognitive flexibility, And I'd like to suggest that perhaps there is a very different way of looking at things. And perhaps just by beginning to imagine, by beginning to look at things in a slightly different way, we can begin to change our lives quite dramatically. For example, I might say, let's say it's 3 months from now, and you experience supreme peace within your body. You might wonder, how did that peace develop? What are the thoughts and attitudes in your mind, in your body, that continue and that grow that peace, and allow you to move ever deeper into that feeling of calm? What is the texture of that feeling? Where does it reside in your body? Or I might say, let's say there's something very significant about this moment. This feeling of significance moves into prominence in your mind. Very significant. Perhaps it's something so significant you haven't felt it, something so significant for a long time. Let's say it's about a 6 out of 10. And let's say it increases, feeling to a 7 out of 10. Very significant. I read this wonderful book by a fellow named Robert Wagner, and it's called Lucid Dreaming, Plain and Simple. It's the greatest book that I've ever read on the subject of lucid dreaming. And it's interesting, as Wagner describes dreams as something of a spiritual path. He talks about how we can explore things in our dreams. We can ask for things in our dreams. For example, we can ask for our dreams to show something significant to us. We can also issue commands in our dreams. So, for example, you find yourself in a lucid dream and you say, "Greater clarity now." Perhaps things are a bit fuzzy in your dream. They become much clearer when you simply ask for clarity. I was pleased to find some months after reading that it worked, that I remembered, it was primed in my mind, and I asked for clarity in my dream. And just like that, the clarity came. I was pleased again when I found some months later that this also works in our waking life. If we are feeling a little fuzzy or hazy, perhaps it's a little warm or humid, and we can simply ask for greater clarity in our minds, in our bodies. And soon it arrives. The more confidence that we say it to ourselves, the greater the clarity we experience. There was a great therapist by the name of Milton Erickson. And I've done a lot of reading about Erickson. Very curious. There's this curious man. I imagine his soul as he was before coming to Earth, making a kind of pact like Odin. Odin was the Norse god who decided to sacrifice parts of his body for wisdom. And Erickson did the same on Earth. He was struck with the disease of polio, which partially paralyzed his body. He spent some time bedridden. And during that time, in his teen years, many months bedridden, he decided to continue with hope and to observe things around him. As a result, he gained great wisdom, gained great insight into the things that he noticed, noticing people's body language, noticing how they would respond. He describes at one point, years later, after he had recovered somewhat, he went to a play and he remarked on how an actor was very talented, because this actor said the word yes 20 times in this play, every time with a different shade of meaning. Now, the good news is we don't have to sacrifice our bodies in order to gain this level of wisdom. All we need to do is continue with this clarity, noticing the things around us, being aware of our peripheral vision, drinking in the world. And once we notice the things that might become important. Now, Erickson had a very interesting idea, which he liked to do with his patients, with his clients. Sometimes he would find that his patients had some trouble, some trauma, some phobia, and he could very easily help them overcome it by bringing them back in time to before that problem arose. So, if you feel comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes. And again, take a deep breath. We can travel back in time within our minds, within our spirits, finding those places of our childhood, perhaps even before we were children. Perhaps as we travel, there might be some blockage, something that inhibits us from traveling back. In that case, we simply go back a little further. Relaxing into that feeling. There is something for us there. What is it? What is the softness of this feeling? In the context of this feeling, perhaps many of our modern problems are not problems. Again, we relax into that feeling. And again, the feeling deepens. What is its flavor? Its texture? How does it sound? Like a whisper in our ears? With that way of being, there is an accompanying attitude that we can notice. Perhaps we have a name for it, a short phrase or a word. If in the following days there were some distress that arrived, we could remember that phrase. The phrase leads to the attitude, and the attitude leads to the way of being. Likewise, if there were a wonderful emotion that arrived in the following days, happiness, joy, elation, gratitude, again we take that phrase, that attitude, that way of being, and it deepens. As explorers, we go finding what lurks within the depths of our minds, find that treasure, that precious jewel of consciousness that stays with us. There is a sweet mantra I like to say to myself. An ancient mantra. It is Purnoham. I am complete. Now, being adults, we might well maintain the innocence of a child, seeing things with fresh eyes, seeing things as they are, new and alive. Let us notice again our bodies, noticing our fingers and our toes, being complete. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha tells us that hatred cannot be driven out by hatred. Only love can drive out hatred. This is an old law, he says. So, being in contact with this purest part of ourselves, the ways of the world become irrelevant. There is something that wants to drive us to hatred, we can leave it behind. The Buddha says further that if a wise person is given the choice between a small pleasure and the prospect of a great happiness, the wise will always choose the prospect of a great happiness. Now, let's leave behind the small pleasure of feeling superior or being petty. It can feel good in the moment. Let's assume the great happiness of innocence. Everything is wonderful. Now, I'd like to take a few moments to tell you a little more about some projects. As I said, there's my podcast. You can go onto the website, beautifulpodcast.com, or search for A Beautiful Thought on the podcasting platforms. There's about 480 episodes, and you can hear the stories of personal transformations. I ask people how they became the people that they are today, because so many times we'll look at a person and assume that they are as they always have been. But every time I ask the person, well, what was a great challenge that you faced that was transformative for you? Basically, everybody has at least one of these stories. Most people have many of them. So those are the questions that I asked on my podcast. So beautifulpodcast.com. There's some other stuff you can get. We're living out at a ranch. My buddy in the back, Dave Robertson, has a ranch where we're living, and we can give you some details about that on the. If you ask us for the business card, you can look at the Instagram or the Telegram channel and see what we're working on out there. I'm building some stuff and planting some gardens and trying to figure out some permaculture things. It's a lot of fun. And what else?
Step through the pool.